Story 1. I was once at a car show and saw a man get in the face of another guy in a wheelchair. I have no idea what started this, but after a few seconds of back and forth, the standing guy pointed his finger at the wheelchair user, displaying aggressive body language. The wheelchair user used his arms to launch himself out of the chair, grabbed the other guy in a headlock, dragged him to the ground, and then pounded his face. Absolutely nobody intervened, because who is going to put their hands on a person with a disability giving someone a well-deserved beating? When the wheelchair user was done, he crawled back to his chair, stood it up, climbed in, and wheeled away slowly as if nothing had happened. The other guy's face was a mess, with blood streaming down. Took him a while to get up and stumble off. I sometimes wonder if the guy who got beaten ever tells people about the time he got beaten up by a guy in a wheelchair. Story 2. I watched some college individuals continually make fun of a rugby team during a costume bar crawl. The rugby players were all dressed as superheroes, wearing spandex outfits. One individual kept mocking a large guy dressed as Robin. The rugby players ignored the mockery for a while until the main instigator walked up and knocked Robin's drink out of his hand. Robin proceeded to defend himself against 3 individuals, including the main instigator, all while wearing green spandex pants. It was poetic to watch. Story 3. A couple of friends and I finished work at 1 a.m. and went to grab a bite at Waffle House. The gentleman manning the grill that night was a Polynesian named Isaac, who was about 5 feet 4 inches in both height and width. He was built like a fire hydrant. A drunken couple came in, acting sloppy, making a scene, and got kicked out just as Isaac went for a smoke break. The man got in Isaac's face, spat on him, and the entire restaurant watched as Isaac slowly and methodically took off his apron, folded it, took off his work shirt, folded it, and then turned back around and decisively subdued the man. I am pretty sure that his children will have a genetic memory of being punched in the face so hard. Isaac, not even breathing heavily, turned back around, unfolded his shirt and put it on, unfolded his apron and put it on, and finished his cigarette just as the police arrived to take the man and his girlfriend away. Story 4. Waiting in line to pay the cover at a bar, the exit doors were right beside us. Big double steel doors with a solid metal divider in between them. A man was being escorted out by 2 bouncers. He was screaming that once they got him outside, they better run because he was going to confront both of them. He slammed a hand into each door to throw them open, smashing his face against the metal divider and knocking himself out cold. It was one of the greatest things I ever saw. Story 5. I was serving drinks at a club on a punk music night. The band that night was particularly wild, and the normal working-class group of regulars was being hassled by a group of skinheads who were only there to fight. A large Native American man was tired of the trouble the skinheads were causing and asked them to stop. One of them, wearing a bowler hat and dressed in white like the characters in A Clockwork Orange, got in his face and tried to provoke him. After a bit of taunting, the skinhead, encouraged by his friends, smacked the man hard across the face. At that moment, the Native American man stood up from the bar stool and revealed that he was 1.5 feet taller than the skinhead. He put a large hand around the skinhead's throat and walked him out the emergency exit while the skinhead kicked and tried to fight back. I heard some panicked screaming coming from the open door, but it started and stopped almost immediately. The Native American man came back inside about 30 seconds later, wearing the skinhead's bowler hat. Story 6. A 25-year-old chef at my workplace was making fun of our 37-year-old coworker for having a 25-year-old girlfriend. The quiet guy immediately pointed out that just 6 months ago, the chef had been pursuing one of the waitresses the moment she turned 18. Perhaps he should reconsider his comments about inappropriate age gaps. Story 7. When I was a kid, there was a huge, terrifying German shepherd named Max who lived next door. He constantly got out of his yard and chased everything. He was mean, and all of us kids knew that as soon as the cry, "Max is out," went up, our only hope was to run home as fast as we could. One day, Max got out, and I saw him chasing a neighborhood cat. Max was hot on its tail and managed to knock it off its feet. It landed on its back, and Max went for its belly. Next thing Max knew, he was wearing that cat like a helmet. It had its front legs wrapped around his head with claws digging in. Max's ear was in the cat's mouth, being ripped to shreds, while the cat furiously kicked Max's muzzle. He couldn't shake it off either. Finally, the cat let go, landed on its feet, and took off. Max ran home yelping in pain, and he didn't chase anyone after that. I don't remember him even trying to get out of his yard anymore. Story 8. The first time I saw it was in middle school. My friend was a small, quiet, and gentle girl who loved anime and spent time with me drawing. One day, the class bully, who was easily twice her size and probably 3 times her weight, started messing with her. He pushed her art supplies off her desk, poked her, and then stole her artwork. She got up and confronted him, slamming him against the wall and pinning him there. To this day, I do not know how such a tiny person could handle someone much stronger than her. Afterward, he broke down into tears and complained to the teacher that she was hitting him, but she never hit him, just pinned him. She did not get in trouble, but word spread quickly that he was the school's biggest coward. He never bothered her again. Story 9. My older brother was intoxicated and picked a fight with what turned out to be one of British Columbia's top 10 kickboxers. Even while intoxicated, the fighter knew not to go for the easy knockout. He delivered powerful body blows to my brother before he got bored and knocked him out. It is one of my favorite memories. Story 10. Seen firsthand? There are a couple of fights that come to mind. One was outside an underground club where a drunk man was getting into it with a random person in the parking lot, who was considerably bigger and more sober than the drunk individual. The intoxicated man was furious, spouting all manner of profanity at this person's entire family tree and, of course, challenged him to a fight. At that point, the random person pulled out lightweight training gloves from his bag and said, "Trust me, you're going to want to do this on grass." His friends tried to drag him away, saying, "That guy is going to kill you." And who just carries gloves around? But the drunk man was ready to fight with the fury of 1,000 suns. In the shortest fight you've ever seen, the random person knocked him out cleanly in one punch and caught his head on the way down. It was downright compassionate. I have never seen anything quite like it. Story 11. At a bar in college on Halloween weekend, probably in 2006 or 2007, I saw a guy dressed as a Spartan from the movie 300 talking to a bouncer. The bouncer picked him up and used his face to open the door, throwing him into the alley. Story 12. This was at a NASCAR event many years ago. Some young men in their early 20s walked to our neighbor's RV and grabbed a bottle of alcohol from their table while the neighbors were walking around the infield partying elsewhere. I was a kid at the time and told the adults I was with, who were a group of middle-aged, overweight, functioning alcoholics, that some younger guys had taken the bottle. A few words were exchanged, and both parties went their separate ways. One of the older men was a bit slower, had a bum knee, and a couple of the younger guys decided to turn back and circle around him. There were some threats and name-calling. The lead provocateur said something like, "You don't have your buddies now. Want to repeat what you said now that you're surrounded?" The older man responded, "Your buddies might take me down, but you'll be asleep before they do." The provocateur lunged, caught a hook, and down he went. By then, most of the group I was with came running back, realizing they were missing one. The only person who got hurt was the mouthy kid. Now, I was maybe 12, and this was almost 30 years ago, so my memory may be a bit fuzzy, but I specifically recall the words, "But you'll be asleep." And I couldn't get over how cool that was to say before knocking someone out. Story 13. I worked at a prison. A young man tried to pick a fight with a person who had an intellectual disability and worked out to ease his frustrations. The person with the disability delivered a series of punches until the instigator became tired of fighting. He then grabbed the instigator by the belt and collar and threw him into a sink. The sink broke off the wall, and he started hitting the instigator with it. As a result, the instigator sustained a broken cheekbone, broken nose, broken orbital, lost a few teeth, and required stitches in several places. The instigator may have landed 2 decent punches before he was overpowered. Story 14. The supervisor kept claiming credit for one of his employees' ideas. One day, management asked the supervisor to explain one of these ideas that would save the company a significant amount of money, which he claimed was his own. He asked the employee to help him describe the formula and how to implement it, but the employee declined, saying, "No, I would like to see you describe this." It was brilliant. The supervisor was let go that day, but unfortunately, the employee with all the ideas was never truly compensated. Story 15. There was a kid who lived in the room next to me in college. He was really tall, quiet, and a bit of a gym enthusiast. One night, we happened to be walking down the same road with separate groups when some fraternity guys started yelling at us to move along for no apparent reason. My friends and I ignored them and kept walking. They told this guy to leave or they would assault him, and he lost it. He ripped off his shirt and shouted, "You don't own the street. Come and make me." They didn't make him or anyone else do anything that night. Story 16. In high school, a group of us was hanging out in the parking lot, wondering if we should enter an all-ages party. A car with 2 guys and 2 girls pulled up and honked the horn. One of the guys, who was with someone that knew someone from our group, was standing in the way, and the driver honked again. Realizing his mistake, he moved and apologized. The driver said, "Get out of the way next time," clearly trying to impress his dates. The guy chuckled and replied, "I'm not afraid of you." The driver screeched to a halt, put the car in park, jumped out, assumed a karate stance, and started throwing kicks. One of the kicks was caught, and he was thrown to the ground, where he received a well-deserved beating. Story 17. Not the wildest experience I've had, but one that directly involved me. There was this guy in high school who was known for having an anger problem. I was trying to open the classroom door, but I had to shuffle my books to my other arm to properly pull the handle since it was on the opposite side. This guy decided I was taking too long and started to huff and yell at me. I turned around, and he was raising his fist to throw a punch while I was cornered in the doorway. Note that I was a pretty average-sized teenage girl, which was not exactly a fair fight. In a split second, my first response was to smack him with an open hand just enough to surprise him and get through the door without being punched. I did not get punched. However, he ended up with quite a mark on his cheek. Not only that, but he then complained to the administration about it. So, he had to admit to multiple people that he tried to punch a girl and instead got slapped in the face. Somehow, I became the bad guy in his story. Play stupid games, win embarrassing prizes. Story 18. The worst bully in high school liked to intimidate everyone. His name is Brent. By the time he was a junior, he started picking on a freshman who held a black belt in martial arts. The freshman remained calm but had had enough. The two agreed on a place, day, and time, and before that, Brent insisted that practicing martial arts was not the same as fighting. I wish I had seen it, but much of the school did, as they wanted to watch Brent lose. Very quickly, Brent found himself in a chokehold and lost consciousness in front of everyone, as the freshman gently lowered him onto the pavement. Brent never stopped being obnoxious. He just changed his style from punk to gangster. He was the whitest, most immature kid ever. I wish I had seen the fight because I would have tied his shoes together. Story 19. High school. A girl and I were about to fight, face to face screaming. She turned, threw her books at the wall, and then windmilled her purse, flinging it at the wall. It broke open, and I burst into laughter. Caught me by surprise and felt ridiculous. I got my ass kicked pretty soundly and learned to never laugh in a fight. Story 20. One of my younger brothers was begging my mom for an air rifle. She was always against it because she didn't want him walking around killing birds and squirrels for no reason. My brother made the mistake of swearing he would eat anything he killed. Mom called his bluff by getting an air rifle and making him go get a bird or squirrel. He hit a bird but didn't kill it, just wounded it. Immediately, my brother started panicking. He had never turned so pale in his life. He broke down and cried as the bird flopped on the ground, squawking in pain. My mom had to get the bird and break its neck, then made my brother bury it in the backyard with a grave marker. Story 21. I was at a bar in Key West one time, and a guy was talking a lot to another guy. I don't know what it was about, but he just wouldn't stop. He said, "I'm going to hurt you," probably a dozen times. Eventually, the other guy had enough and slammed his head into the bar, almost knocking him out. The bartender looked over and asked what happened, and he said, "I don't know. I think he tripped." He then threw some cash on the bar and walked off while the other guy was quietly trying to stand back up. Story 22. I managed a brewery for a while. One time, a man came in without shoes. I told him he had to wear shoes in the brewery because people break glasses often, and it's a safety issue. He decided that was the most offensive thing he had ever heard, got in my face and started yelling, telling me he would harm me. So, I let him know he was no longer welcome and that if he stayed, I would call the police. He continued shouting at me, using slurs and making threats. I called the police with my cell phone right in front of him and even put it on speakerphone so he knew I was not bluffing. He kept yelling and threatening me. The 911 dispatcher heard him and actually expedited the police response. It helped that the brewery was downtown, where there was already police presence. Within 2 minutes, the officers arrived, and he began yelling at them and threatening them. They were not in a good mood and quickly had him forcefully on the ground when he got in their faces. Turned out the man had outstanding warrants. He experienced the consequences of his actions when all he had to do was walk away. It wasn't like we were going to serve him the moment he threatened me. Story 23. Making up names here, but one of my best friends, Rob, got beaten by my other good friend, Riley. We were playing some pickup football and for no reason, Rob started taunting and talking a lot of smack to Riley. Felt personal. To this day, I have no idea why he was behaving this way because, while they weren't best friends, they got along. Long story short, Riley and Rob squared up. Riley punched Rob in the gut, grabbed his head, and kneed him in the face, shattering his nose. It was over in 5 seconds. Rob is one of my best friends. He's like a brother to me, but he absolutely deserved to get beaten. He was acting well out of line. Story 24. I witnessed a man being attacked by approximately 30 people in a bar after he called a woman a derogatory term and slapped her. He fled to a restaurant a couple of blocks away before the police arrived. The woman confronted him and defended herself in the parking lot. Story 25. I wrote that check, or my friend and I did. We were camping at a lake, sitting on the beach and watching some girls play in the water. We didn't even approach them. After a while, 2 guys walked up to us and said, "Those girls say you were harassing them." I did judo and was wearing a tournament t-shirt, and my friend was huge for his age, almost 6 feet tall at 14. So we stood up and decided to act tough. That's when one of them flashed a gun and calmly said, "I will shoot you." We sat back down, explained that we hadn't even talked to those girls, and kept our heads on a swivel for the rest of the trip. A few people have commented on flashing a gun at teens. I should clarify that they were also teens, the girls and boys maybe a couple of years older. Story 26. After a serious accident in a rail yard while we were cleaning up a major derailment, one of the younger workers was still shaken up and not ready to return to work. He had nearly been killed, along with several others, and watched his operator get badly hurt. You don't want someone whose mind isn't in the game during a train wreck. It's a dangerous enough job without distractions. When he told his supervisor that he couldn't handle the situation, the supervisor should have respected that and sent him off-site. Scott, the supervisor, had serious little man syndrome and was one of the cockiest individuals I have ever met. His response to a traumatized young man saying he couldn't cope that night was to call him weak, tell him to man up, and get back to work. That started an argument that devolved into the nastiest fistfight I have ever seen. Scott got angry and threw a punch, and the young man retaliated fiercely. He had been receiving harassment from Scott since he started and had apparently had enough. He punched, kicked, elbowed, and beat him down, then started smashing his face in with a hard hat. Scott was such a bloody mess after they pulled the young man off him that even his own wife would not have recognized him. Story 27. If I want to sniff glue, I am going to sniff glue. 20 years ago, maybe more, a young man was pushing around his grandfather, who appeared very old, with skin that suggested he did not have many years left on the uptown street. Later, I read that this young man was arrested while raging, kicked out a rear window of the police car, and I have not heard anything about him since, but I am pretty sure he died in prison. Do not sniff glue, people. It was a trend. Hopefully, it will never be a trend again. Story 28. 20 years ago, we lived in a difficult part of a large city. I had just gotten divorced and was working constantly. My 13-year-old son was living with his father for school purposes, finishing the school year. My sister lived just a few houses away from them, and I was about 5 minutes down the highway from everyone. My son was a sweetheart, but also a large kid. He was about 5 feet 11 inches tall and probably weighed around 250 pounds. He was a skateboarder and a heavy metal music fan. It was unusual to see a heavy-set skateboarder, especially one with long hair and a shoelace for a belt. But I'm getting sidetracked. Unfortunately, he became an easy target. Over the course of a few weeks, he was harassed by a boy his age who attended his school and lived in the neighborhood. It started with verbal taunts, but the harder my son tried to ignore it, the worse it got. While he was simply trying to skate, this boy would follow him, hurling insults and throwing pebbles, saying inappropriate things about me. He did anything to provoke a reaction. I can't imagine what was happening in that boy's home that led him to pick on the biggest kid in the neighborhood. But he did. Additionally, my ex-husband was the type of person who would get angry if he found out someone was bullying his child. So my son didn't tell him. He also said he didn't tell me because he knew I was already stressed and didn't want to worry me more. Eventually, it escalated into a physical confrontation. My son won by knocking the boy down and telling him to leave him alone. He thought it was over, but the boy returned with his older brother. The brother punched my son in the face and then smashed his skateboard, destroying my son's main source of joy. I think the boys realized they had crossed a line because the following afternoon, when they got off the bus, the younger boy hurried ahead to escape my son. However, my son caught up with him. He chased him down, shouted his name, and when the boy turned around, my son executed a jumping kick, hitting him square in the stomach with both feet. This knocked the wind out of the boy and folded him in half. Thankfully, the boy just squirmed on the ground for a few minutes until he caught his breath, then got up crying and ran away. He never bothered my son again. It may sound unbelievable, but I wasn't even there. My sister called me at work to tell me what had happened. She witnessed the entire event from her kitchen window and described it as ugly but also the most incredible thing she had ever seen. It took her a moment to get mad because she was so astonished. Years later, we discussed it, and my son said it was pure rage. He was fed up with everything, and losing his skateboard pushed him over the edge. He mentioned he didn't even think about the flying kick. It just happened. He was just as surprised as everyone else. Story 29. Imagine the biggest snob you can think of, a prissy, always talking, two-faced individual who is your coworker. Every morning, when everyone else is quiet, you can hear her loud voice as she walks in the door. People were tired of her, especially when she was trying to gain favor with the boss and thought she was going to get a promotion. One day, the boss held a meeting and told us all to take a seat. This person decided to sit next to the boss, facing everyone else. She even nodded with the boss as if she were leading the meeting too. But she wasn't. She talked for days about how much more money she would be making and how nice her hours would be. Well, she didn't get the promotion. I saw her storm out of the building and slam her purse against her car before speeding away. She had told everyone she was getting that position, but someone else received it. Story 30. There was a girl in high school who had been boxing since early childhood. Her father was a briefly active professional boxer turned trainer, and her uncle was a Golden Gloves boxer while serving in the Navy. One kid, who was raised to believe women were dainty and fragile, wagered $200 that he could knock her down. He further insulted her by stating he would only slap her while she could use full punches. This was typical adolescent behavior, so the match took place behind the school and was bare-knuckle since there were no gloves available. In just 5 seconds, he threw a jab and a hook in quick succession, landing a precise blow to her chin, and was knocked out. Story 31. Not mine, but my dad's story. He said that one time in his youth, he was cutting through a park in a bad neighborhood when a local gang started chasing him. A couple of the larger members got tired quickly and dropped out of the chase. Then one by one, the others also dropped out, except for one last gang member, a guy even smaller than my father. My dad said he turned around and punched the kid in the mouth. He landed several more blows before the other kids realized what was happening and started running after him again. He said he was laughing while he got away. Story 32. As a young constable, I arrested a man who went peacefully into handcuffs, but then started yelling at me to take off my uniform and see how tough I was. I told him that his desire to fight with a younger, larger man in his underwear was a pretty weird kink, but that was his choice. He spent the rest of the drive to custody trying to explain that wasn't what he meant. Story 33. I was having a bad day in high school when two bullies tried to pick on me. I just said, "Guys, I'm not having a good day. Please leave me alone." They continued, like bullies do, taunting me with the whole, "I'm not touching you" routine. So, I pushed one of their hands away, and the guy proceeded to punch me in the eye. I weighed my options, and since we were all in Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps together, I walked away straight to our JROTC instructor's office. I reported what happened, they brought the guy in, he corroborated my story, and they took him to the principal's office. I didn't see him for 5 school days. When he came back, he looked like he had lost a good 15 to 20 pounds. He asked to talk to me with our instructor present. He sincerely apologized, saying, "You were clearly not having a good day, and I should have listened. I definitely shouldn't have hit you, and I apologize for that." How couldn't he handle the consequences? His parents didn't take it lightly. His punishment at home consisted of yard work from 4 a.m. to 10 p.m., rain or shine. He received a peanut butter and jelly sandwich for breakfast, another for lunch, and a bologna and cheese sandwich for dinner, with only water to drink. His parents worked him hard for 18 hours a day, allowing breaks only to eat or go to the bathroom, and he could only go inside for those 2 reasons and to refill his water. I kind of felt bad for him. Story 34. I worked at a place where we had a regular named Viv who was 6 feet tall without heels. She was a very sweet woman, and I never saw her argue with anyone. Until one night, a 5-foot-tall co-ed came in with some other wealthy college students who were slumming it. After losing at pool, she proceeded to call Viv, who was with her black boyfriend, a derogatory term. Viv didn't hesitate. She pulled back and threw a sharp right hook to the co-ed's jaw, resulting in a knockout with no count needed. We treated Viv to complimentary drinks for a couple of weeks after that. It was the only good bar fight I have ever witnessed. Story 35. The funniest moment for me was a 65 to 70-year-old man in a wheelchair with no legs trying to fight a group of 3 hospital security officers. We simply held his wrists gently. Story 36. 15 years as a climbing arborist, and I still consider myself part of this common observation. Like many people new to the job, they often want to try climbing and think it will be easy. They may get about 20 feet up before realizing it is not what they expected. Story 37. My stepdad used a racial slur toward a group of black individuals at our apartment complex one night when they kept honking the horn at him to hurry up at the gate. I witnessed that man getting attacked. It was intense. Story 38. In high school, a guy a grade below mine was trash-talking a tough guy and fighter in my grade. This lower grade student kept bragging about how he would beat up the guy in my grade. Eventually, word got around, and a fight was set up after school in front of the school. The lower grade student talked trash on the spot, and the guy in my grade offered him the first swing. He took the swing, but the guy in my grade stepped back to dodge it and then swung at him without any intention of hitting him. Why? The guy in my grade had a trademark move. He never hit with his fist but swung as though he would before leaning in and connecting with his elbow instead. He did the same here, slamming the other guy in the forehead with his elbow, knocking him unconscious. The guy in my grade then pushed him away, helped him up, brushed him off, gave him some advice, and his friends escorted him away. After all this, the guy a grade below became much more timid and even somewhat friends with the guy in my grade who knocked him out briefly. I still thought it was kind of funny that the guy in my grade gave advice like, "Don't fall asleep, take some pain relievers, and drink water. If you feel sick at all, go see a doctor." Story 39. A high school student claimed he could beat anyone in a fight because he had watched a lot of anime. He was defeated by a marching band clarinetist in under 30 seconds. Story 40. A neighbor told me, "I am not afraid of jail. Call the police." He was arrested and was in the back of a police car 5 minutes later with 3 charges. He did try to run and they used a taser on him. He accepted a plea deal, moved immediately, and was never heard from again. Turns out he was, in fact, afraid of jail. Story 41. I found out my ex was cheating on me, but I wasn't in a position to walk away. After fighting for days, she suggested we take a break and see other people for a while to evaluate our feelings for each other. First, the guy she was involved with dumped her a few days later because his wife found out. Then one of her uncles was hosting a big barbecue party, and we were expected to attend since she hadn't informed her family about our break. I spent the night with a coworker I had asked out and didn't come home until well after the party. She demanded to know where I was, and when I told her, she became furious, insulted me, and locked me out of my bedroom. I ended up back at the coworker's place, and she was happy to see me. Story 42. I was at a bar with a group from work one night when a drunk person decided that the appropriate response to one of the girls asking him to dance was to call her a derogatory name, grab her by the face, and push her to the ground. I worked in a hair salon, a large one. Every head turned as that man went down under 14 pairs of heels. The bouncers had to drag him out from under the crowd by the ankles because they certainly were not going in there. Story 43. A buddy of mine, let's call him Smash, in high school was targeted by an older and bigger guy, whom we'll refer to as Douchebag. Douchebag would harass my friend in the hallway between periods. Smash wasn't huge, but he was very muscular and took fitness seriously. One day, Douchebag made a comment to my friend in passing. Smash decided he had enough and confronted Douchebag. I tried to stop him, but Smash's rage had reached a tipping point. I was at a distance, but I saw my friend pointing and yelling at Douchebag when Smash punched him so hard in the face that I heard a popping noise. Douchebag picked up my friend and tried to slam him into some lockers while Smash was punching him in the head. The fight didn't last long, as some school administrators broke it up. Needless to say, Douchebag was humbled and didn't pick on my friend again. Smash punched Douchebag so hard in the face that he broke his orbital bone, which I assume was the popping sound I heard. It's amazing he didn't lose his eye. Douchebag later became a police officer in a small town, which honestly isn't surprising. Story 44. Driving by Wrigley after a Cubs game, I saw a guy hit a girl. Within 30 seconds, 5 other guys crossed the street to confront him. Story 45. This is not set in America. A friend of mine, who is a dual citizen, quietly joined the military as soon as he finished high school and has been deployed to Afghanistan. He is not particularly striking. He is 5 feet 7 inches tall, is fit rather than muscular, and is pretty quiet, keeping to himself. It was summer and my friend was back in town in a different country. We were at a party when a drunk man, who was quite large, started arguing with him about something unprovoked from years ago in high school. My friend received a beer thrown at him but remained super respectful and tried to walk away. As he was walking away, the drunk man grabbed him by the shoulder. My friend quickly grabbed the man's arm, spun around, and dropped him so fast that I barely saw it. He spiraled the man's arm, putting him on his back on the ground, and was ready to strike him in the face and throat. Then he just stopped. He stood up, told the driver they needed to leave, and walked away without saying anything else. I've never seen someone get taken down so quickly or have that level of self-restraint. Story 46. In my early 20s, I drunkenly challenged a Hooters waitress to a hula hoop competition for $20. It was the easiest $20 she ever made. Story 47. I am all about being environmentally friendly and driving an economy car, a Ford Focus. However, I am 6 feet 1 inch tall and weigh 300 pounds, with a lot of muscle. I was approaching a stoplight outside a high school when some students, 2 boys and 2 girls, cut me off. I gestured to show that I was not happy with their driving. At the light, they decided to get out of their car and started walking toward me in a threatening manner. Both of them, when wet, would have weighed around 200 pounds. I got out of my car, which is just above my waist. When they saw me, they turned around and got back in their car without saying a word while the girls in the back seat were laughing. Story 48. I was on a smoke break with some IT professionals behind a data center in an alley. I don't smoke, but I hang out with people who do. And I learned early on in IT that it was the great equalizer among staff and management alike. Great gossip circulates around those smokers. This data center was in a sketchy part of town, and sometimes unsavory individuals would be back there. One day, one of those individuals approached us and said, "Can I have a cigarette?" "My last one," replied one person. "I don't smoke," I said. The individual looked at me and growled, "Forget you, fatty." Then he turned to Eric, our lead network engineer. Eric was small, about 5 feet 1 inch, and looked young, even though he was in his mid-30s and not someone you wanted to mess with. "How about you, kid?" he asked. "No." "What do you mean, no?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't want to." The individual leaned closer and, with gritted teeth, made a quiet threat. "How about I slice your face, boy?" All of us had items like phone cases, wire strippers, and multi-tools. You could hear a bunch of people unsnapping equipment and crowding around the tough guy. It sounded like we all had unsnapped a group of holsters. "I am willing to take that chance," Eric said. He actually had a knife, a wide-bladed Gerber that he used to strip wires. This guy had nothing but a tracksuit. Eric didn't pull it out, but he placed his hand on the holster. We were all ready to confront this guy if he attacked Eric. I have no doubt Eric would have used the knife and defended himself effectively. But the individual realized he was outnumbered and backed away. He executed the "you all aren't worth it" tough guy retreat and tried to walk away nonchalantly, as if he didn't care. After he left, we discussed our surprise at our own actions. We had a long conversation about how we were all bullied as kids for being nerds, and some experiences just stick with you. In retrospect, it was probably unwise, but we never saw the guy again. Story 49. I once called a bully a big, heavy ballerina, and he proceeded to punch me hard in the stomach, which winded me for a whole hour. Story 50. Once, I was jokingly talking trash to my ex-husband, and I thought he was going to chase me. So, I started running and slipped, falling face first into the mud. Story 51. My best friend and I were at a party in the late 1990s. He was a Golden Gloves boxer, a semi-professional kickboxer, and a hand-to-hand combat instructor in the Marines. I'm sure he had a more impressive title, but I can't remember. We had some guys at the party eyeing us and talking trash most of the night. He was home on leave and didn't want to get into any trouble, so we decided to leave. I dropped him off at his apartment, and the 3 guys followed us. I saw them run toward his apartment. By the time I turned around and ran the 20 yards back, he had knocked all 3 of them out and was on the phone with the police. He put 2 of them in the hospital with internal bleeding and broke the other guy's jaw. He wasn't even sweating as he walked inside to grab a beer while speaking to emergency services. They tried to sue him, but the judge threw the case out. Story 52. 2 men once attempted to mug my friend. They were large individuals, and she was a small Asian woman walking alone in a dangerous neighborhood at night, so they clearly saw her as an easy target. What they didn't realize was that she had spent the past 30 years studying various martial arts, and the long tube she was carrying was her bakken, a large wooden sword. She defeated them decisively. Story 53. I lived with some friends in off-campus housing, and a fraternity bloomed in the house next door. It hadn't been a fraternity house when we rented, but suddenly, in October, they were having pledge parties. One of my housemates was a 5 feet 3 inches law enforcement major who was going to become a police officer in Dade County. But at that moment, she was snoozing comfortably in our house. We were all asleep until the pledge party next door spilled out onto our shared driveway, awakening us at 2 a.m. on a Wednesday night with an argument that grew louder by the moment. My bedroom was next to where they were arguing, so I got up and went outside to confront the drunken pledges. My message was simple: either leave or I would call the police. As I tried to impress this upon the young men, my roommate tiptoed out in her matching nightgown and robe, barefoot and wincing with each step on the gravel driveway. Her painted toenails glittered in the streetlight. We were all distracted by this scene as she arrived to stand in front of the situation. One man wanted to drive home, and his friends were rightly trying to convince him otherwise. He was a tall, drunken man, and she looked up at him, telling him that driving drunk was a bad idea and that he should either stay at the house or let his friends drive him home. She spoke firmly but kindly. She had just experienced the dangers of drunk driving and understood the horrors of it. He responded by calling her a vulgar term. My friend was the youngest of 5, the only girl with 4 older brothers. Those brothers were typical older brothers, teaching her to defend herself by being violent with her. No one wondered why she went into law enforcement. The use of that term, however, was not tolerated in their world, and they had taught her that any man who used that word against her should be punished. They also taught her how to deliver that punishment. I saw her expression change from kind annoyance to disappointed fury. She was sorry about what she was about to do. With the stance of a golfer ready to hit off the tee, she twisted her body and punched the man square in the jaw, sending him down to the gravel like a felled tree. We all watched it happen and then stood around looking at him while she tiptoed back to our house, muttering her frustration. The other pledges gathered him up and carried him away, and we never heard a word about it again. We didn't experience any drunken fights in our driveway after that. Story 54. A young man, around 17 or 18 years old, was verbally attacking 4 older men who were getting into their van. He was using various offensive names and insults that are not well received by Italians. As the van was about to leave the parking spot, the young man approached and continued his tirade. Suddenly, the back doors flew open, and 3 men jumped out and physically assaulted him for about a minute before returning to the van and driving away quickly. The young man got up, covered in blood, and suffered a broken nose and a split lip, which he had evidently earned. Story 55. When I was about 13, I was mugged on public transit by a group that appeared to be 18 or 19 years old. A few months later, the same group tried again as I left a different transit station on my way to meet my dad. They didn't get anything, but when I reached my dad's office and told him they tried again, he simply said, "Show me." We went back to the station, and they were all hanging out, sitting on a railing. My dad, dressed in his office suit, didn't say anything to the group. He just walked up and slapped one of them with enough force to send him flying off the railing. The rest scattered, yelling to get the shank. He told them to try it. My father, a Kiwi who played rugby his whole life, was having none of it. I really enjoyed that as a kid. Story 56. I live in a small town. We have one black resident named Anthony. Everyone likes him. He is a very outgoing person. Everyone in town knows him as he works at a local restaurant as a chef, and he is exceptional in the kitchen. One evening, some tourists from the United Kingdom came to the local pub. They were a bit drunk and disruptive, and everyone ignored them, though you could see people getting irritated. Suddenly, they started targeting Anthony, the only black resident we have, with snarky comments that escalated to racial slurs. One of the tourists started to shoulder up to Anthony, and rightfully so, Anthony landed the first blow. Somehow, these individuals assumed we would support them. They were mistaken. The whole pub turned against them. You don't mess with our Anthony. He is part of our town. Story 57. At a college party, I saw a girl screaming at another guy, shouting that he was a bitch and that she would kill him. She ran at him, clawing, and he slapped her across the face. I don't think she had ever been hit before. She went down so hard that she demolished a table and lay there on the sticky floor, as if she had been poleaxed, until she started crying. It was unexpected. He didn't even hit her that hard. I believe she never thought that would happen to her. There was some talk about pressing charges, but fortunately we had the entire incident on camera. Story 58. About 10 years ago, I was at a bar where some longshoremen were commemorating a significant moment in Union history. One man kept trying to talk to them, but they told him to leave them alone. About an hour later, he went outside and knocked one of the longshoremen's motorcycles over, then came back inside and admitted he did it. The owner of the motorcycle proceeded to severely beat him, then relented for a moment to allow the man to run out the door. The bouncer, who also acted as a cook, told him he had to leave. He could come back tomorrow, but he had to go now. Story 59. Back in high school, I vividly remember an incident where one girl attacked another, grabbing her by the hair. The girl who was being attacked broke free and executed a roundhouse kick to the attacker's face, knocking her out instantly. I attended Taekwondo classes with her when we were children. I eventually quit, but she continued with it for all those years. It was glorious to watch her in action. Story 60. I trained at a mixed martial arts gym in my 20s. Some of the guys would often get into fights at bars. Usually, they would come out on top as it was a legitimate gym and very few people trained there at the time. 3 of them got into a fight with a group of about 8. One of the mixed martial arts practitioners ended up in a snowbank, getting punched by 3 or 4 people. The non-mixed martial arts participants backed off a bit, and one of their female friends started hitting the guy in the snowbank. The mixed martial arts practitioner got up and threw a strong right hand at the first person he saw. The girl was knocked out cold just as the police arrived. Story 61. A man was heavily intoxicated and bothering some women in a house, while their friends expressed concern to us on the front lawn. He claimed he was looking for his friend, but instead was harassing random women while clearly inebriated. When he came out the front door, the women pointed him out, saying he was acting creepily and making them uncomfortable. We approached him and suggested he call it a night, even offering to call him a cab. As he walked back towards the house about 20 feet away, we told him that it was time for him to leave. He suddenly became aggressive, ranting about my baseball cap, which seemed completely unrelated. He threatened us and charged at us with his arms flailing. At that moment, I had no training in self-defense. I learned some martial arts years later. However, the person next to me clearly did. He calmly moved me aside, and as the intoxicated man approached, he elegantly sidestepped and expertly took him down by locking his ankle and pushing his shoulder, causing him to flip sideways to the ground. The man was caught off guard and ended up on the ground, winded, while the people near the house began to applaud. We helped him up and walked him down the street for a bit. He insisted he would walk home and apologized for his behavior. It felt like the situation escalated and then de-escalated in just a few minutes. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.